Okay, so we have it teed up, and before we all arrived, it looked like this. So, and Delaware, all of Delaware will not look like this in the future, regardless of what we do. But the goal is to make it look somewhat more like this, at least from a water quality standpoint. So this is we have sort of narrowed it now down to several questions to give you an introductory feeling of what we try to do and where we are. So when we started this many years ago, when we discussed initially, and some of you may remember, when the stormwater regulations were under consideration 6 years ago, 7 years ago, and the Senate weighed in, Senator Harker weighed in.
Yep.
There were interim regulations. The interim regulations lasted for a while. Finally, the final regulations were put in place because the originally adopted regulations were found to be did not meet the requirements, were struck down by the Supreme Court. There's a whole history to the Delaware stormwater regulations, but we do have them, new ones since 2019. So in the 2019 regulations, I, among a number of people, were on the Regulatory Advisory Committee for the state of Delaware, and we some of us pushed for inclusion into the regulations which would allow stormwater offset districts and banking. That is in the regulation. It is a allowed activity. So we had high hopes 3 years ago after the adoption of the regulations early in 2019, and approached DNRC with a 4-column concept. And that's what were in the initial goals. When you look at this, stormwater quality and quantity, nutrient reduction, and that's non-point source nutrient reduction credits, generation of that, and also wetland creation credits. So the first, the stormwater quality is allowed under the regulations. The other 3 would have necessitated extra lifting by the state of Delaware. So, and the federal government in the last case, the wetland exchange, with the Corps of Engineers involved. So, Mr. Lawson and I have been to a number of meetings with the state, in particular that particular division, and including the secretary, and we got some limited support, and today we are willing and ready and able to drop back to what's allowed under the current law and let the rest fall where it is, and we will have a slide to that. So that's what is the offset district in the bank. When you read the regulations with stormwater, they're specifically mentioned, and another part of the Delaware Code allows each county to set up a stormwater utility. It's called a utility, whichever way you want to create it. So the stormwater district is allowed in 2 pieces of the Delaware Code. And that's where we're going to hang our hat on, that we have the right to do this. It still will require a memorandum with the state. Before, what we had envisioned, a memorandum, 1 memorandum, 4 memorandums of understanding for each of the column, with pilot projects for each. So, much, much easier. We have 1 ordinance, which we create, our laws, which governs us, and 1 memorandum of understanding with the state, very similar to what the state has already with DelDOT, because DelDOT already is a delegated authority under state law, and they have a memorandum of agreement to do just the same thing we're proposing to do. They did not need the stormwater regulations because they could do it among the departments of the state of Delaware. So what do we provide? We provide, and then I'll get back to the HUC 10, so don't worry about this right now. I have an extra slide for that. So we, again, allow it in the HUC 10, or you can have a way to manage the resource protection event, RPV. And this will come up several times again, and I have the definition on the next slide. So who will benefit from this? Right now what we have is the preferred stormwater approach today is what we call, what the code calls functional equivalency, which you know as really large ponds, and a non-holistic approach. So it's piece by piece by piece by a not preferred stormwater approach because it does not really provide any quality benefit. It provides a functional equivalent of a benefit. So I've been vehemently against this functional equivalency from day one because it does not provide the quality benefit, it just is functionally equivalent. But that's a completely different story, and I will not bother you with it anymore. So when we will be available for implementation, as I said, we will have to create our law, which governs it, and the state will have to give us a memorandum, which will be literally, the one with Delaware is 2 pages. When we had our initial one, Mr. President, the big one, we had like 14 pages. So we pulled it down to 2 pages. We have a draft pretty much written for the memorandum, and I think we can get that readily over the finish line in the not so distant future. What can it be used for? So, and that's the key thing. So once we have the program implemented, fully up and running, we have our projects, we have monies flowing back to you, you can use it for purchasing more conservation in fee simple, purchasing conservation easements, or doing more projects either on our land or on third-party land.
Got to close the loop here for me. So you're saying we'll actually have dollars flowing back to us. So we're going to sell these credits, in essence, to individuals that need them for some reason, you know, whether it's a housing development or an industrial project. We're going to sell our credits to them. We're going to get cash, literal cash, and then we can take that money and use it to purchase open space and or environmental easements.
Open space.
Am I getting
open
that right?
space in the sense, not soccer fields, but
yeah, wildland preservation, yes. You know, land, yeah.
Water quality related open space.
And land that we would, now I've always, you know, followed George Cole's mantra of public money, public access. So would land purchased this way be available for public access?
Yes.
In some form?
Yes.
It would.
No question. But not for active, the hotel at the dunes would not be that's not in that same lane. It's not a water, you have to have some kind of water quality benefit which goes with it. You know, like just the purchase the county did on Ride 5, the Comfort Burton tract, is a prime example of that land. We got the money from the state for that one. Completely different animal that came out of it's a long story how we got the money. But that purchase is a perfect example of what you would look for in terms of, and that has public access in terms of hunting, you know, and you can walk the trail, but it doesn't impact the water quality.
Right. Interesting.
So but I have a complete slide of how we collect. And
is there a criteria established as to who we would be willing to sell these credits to?
I'll get to that in a second, if I may.
Sure.
So, and who's responsible? We are completely responsible for the program once we create the legislation, the underlying governmental legislation. We do have oversight over how we account and track the credits, i.e., they get essentially auditing privileges because that's what the Delaware state law requires. So we have to have open books. Our ledger has to be, there's no double accounting. We have to be depositing credits before we can sell credits, etc. That is the oversight and auditing by the DNRC. But they have no say, period, in what you do in terms of projects and or purchases. That's very important.
DNRC doesn't.
No, absolutely not. It's a county program with sole discretion by county council. Moving on.
Right, yeah, keep good, yeah.
So because we're going to use these three terms throughout the presentation, these are taken directly out of the code as it exists today, state law. And so what you see, the first one is the research protection event, which is the event which generates that, or looks at that storm, which is associated with the quality component. The other one, the CV, is the storm, which is the 10% storm, but it used to be known as the 10-year storm event. And the last one is the flooding event, which used to be called the 100-year storm. But these are the new definitions and the new terms, so we now use them exclusively. So from here on out, we will be talking about the RPV component, the quality component. By the way, this is our example, one of the projects. We have the full list of the projects in the credits, but that's just one of them, and that starting to look pretty nice out there. So, here's the famous letter we received from the secretary after a long and arduous process, and it also gives you a little bit of the history why it took so long to get here. We actually went out to an RFP authorized by you to find an environmental consultant for that purpose. So we worked with the consultants for several years. They're still on board. The main consultant, Mr. Eisenhardt, left. We have him now under a different firm, and we will be, if you work with us, I will be back authorizing some more hours for him to finish this out with us on the ordinance and the memorandum side. We started the negotiations with DNIC in early 2019, pretty much before the regulations were approved. As they were going through the legal process, we started our interactions with the department. And you can see how many times we actually dealt with them. So if we had been successful, the Delaware Code would have applied not only to the stormwater side, but also to the on-site regulations and the TMDLs for the Chesapeake and the inland bays. But we had to put that on ice. So that's why in the fall of 2022, that was literally 6 weeks ago, Ms. Thompson and I were on another one of the Teams meetings. I didn't even count all the Teams meetings. So we were on another one of these, and I finally said, we're just spinning our tires in the mud. We'll just proceed, generate the legislation, because you have the authority to do so. You can do that without any, that's why you don't see DNRC in the room. We certainly told them about it. They know we're doing it. They encouraged us to do it, so here we are. But, so,
Question.
yes, moving backwards.
If we're partnering with Center for the Inland Bays, do we get all the credits or do we split it with them?
We get all the credits.
So what's in it for them?
They have extra dollars. They have, for example, they have afforestation dollars from different sources. So when you see me come to you and say, we want to do an afforestation project, we've done afforestation project with zero money from us in it. We provided the land and we provided the sponsorship. They find other sources of money, so they're a good partner for us on that.
We just coordinate.
They coordinate.
That's even better.
We don't do it. We provide the umbrella for them to be able to get the funds. They have a co-op.
Are some sites more valuable than others? I would think so.
Some sites are more valuable from a location standpoint in terms of where they're located in the watershed, yes.
We're trying to go after those first, I guess.
The center actually has a evaluation. They actually have pre-identified sites.
Good.
And they have prioritized certain sites.
That's way ahead of me. I'm just trying to find out what's going on.
No, that's exactly what happened. But again, they funded that effort for the prioritization of sites.
Very good. Good.
That is true. So here's this is a slide of pain, right, Todd? On the left, our lofty goals. On the right, the reality. So phase one, implement now, that is focused on, as we said, what's allowed under the regulations today, concentrating on quality. We have projects implemented. We have the demand is set by council, and I get into more detail explaining answering Councilman Riley's question. So everything's in play for phase one. I have some hope for phase two, but maybe there will be another engineer and another council. So let's move on. I don't want to talk about the slide anymore, Todd. Mr. Administrator, do you want to say anything about the slide? Okay, let's move on. So remember we talked a lot about the HUCs, what's allowed under the code, and what is how they should look. So, and when you look at this slide, you see the HUC 8 and the HUC 10s on that slide. So, for example, these are the 3 HUC 10s in the inland bays. So we can create a project here, and we can use the credits in this HUC 10 or the adjacent HUC 10s within the same HUC 8. So this sort of gives you, the projects we have currently created are all in this area. So they are globally usable in the inland bays, the way the state regulations are written. we like to, go ahead.
I hate to keep interrupting, but I'm stuck on this who do we sell the credits to question. And so council has to approve that. Is that my understanding?
Yes, so
we would approve that, and the criteria is established. I'm just wondering if there's potential for controversy if we sold the credits to, somebody that would be viewed as less than environmentally friendly, so to speak.
So and that we is the financial and the engineering B. Ms. Jennings and I discussed the approach with the administrator and our president at the high level. So we felt this is not a one and done. We believe the ordinance should reflect the county council setting several things in the budget process every year. So every council has an opportunity every 12 months to revisit the issue. And what we want you to set is 3 criteria. First of all, the criteria of what a credit should cost. There is a floor. We cannot set a credit to less than what the state law allows.
Okay.
The Delaware Code already has a number in it which gets adjusted by inflation.
Okay.
So that number is our floor. You can set it higher or you can set it equal.
Can it be more than one price based on where it is? Good.
We have not briefed Mr. Riley, but that's the third knob. I call it the knob. So the second one, first is the price. The second one is, you remember each project which comes forward in your world, in the county development world, has to provide water quality treatment. So you could set the percentage. We are proposing you set the percentage for each year on how much of that water quality criteria, which is required, you want to sell from the bank. And that is once you set that number, that's a 12-month number. And we discussed that yesterday. We met with the district discussing how the actual implementation would work. So the answer to them was, you will hear us in the budget process make a recommendation, that's we again, the financial and the engineering we. County council would consider it, and in the final budget ordinance there would be a number for the percentage required to be purchased from the bank. So that particular number, again, would be based on what we have available, what the demand is. So that again sets that percentage. The third one is the factor which we call the weight factor. So we want you to think about a factor of what you would like to see the water quality benefit to be used for, or to be weighted at. So for example, if somebody proposes a extended detention water quality project, right, under their development, commercial or residential, and we said, well, we don't like these. we want you to do a ephemeral wetland, for example. So we would set the weighting factor for an extended detention at 0.5, so you only get half of the credit, while the other one would be a 2 for the ephemeral wetland, so you would get a better rating, so that means your percentage gets cut in half or gets doubled. So based on that, you have 3 criteria you can think about, you and future councils can weigh every year. And that gives you a lot more control over how water quality is treated in the future than you have today. Today you have 0 control.
So we can target areas that are at risk and move the needle a little bit towards.
You could do that too. That is above and beyond that. You could say you wanted to have a 4th one where you set percentages based on area.
Mm-hmm.
But that, we haven't thought about that. We more thought about strictly from a quality standpoint. Because when you look at the TMDLs, how they're written, all the waters we're dealing with are impaired. And if we were to select it by area, then we would sort of usurp which we believe is what is more impaired than others. So I wasn't quite ready to go there, but that's, if you're telling us you want a 4th criteria, we'd be happy to write it in.
I'm just thinking some areas have bigger impact than others, right? So target them. That's my thought. I don't know.
Councilman, it's your program.
Your program, you
Mine?
said. You just said your program.
It is your program.
Can I interrupt and ask a question?
Schaefer.
Can you, just in layman's terms for me, so you're selling these credits to a developer who may want a concession on what, or are they being sold to a reseller or broker?
No, only to an end user. Only to the end user. So, if you have a project which went through the land use process, right?
Yep.
Any project, commercial development, conditional use, planned unit development, you name it.
Yep.
That project, once it receives preliminary approval, will have to get a stormwater permit which contains a quality component. What we're saying is our ordinance would say X% of that quality component has to be purchased from the bank. That's what we're saying. So the project is already through the land use process. I'm following in the stormwater world the same coal rule we always followed in the sewer world. There's no preferential treatment about any project over any other project, because you're saying we cannot give you any of these unless you have land use approval. So it's not people always want to, hey, let us try to create a sewer district. No, we're not doing any sewer districts before you have land use approval. Let us buy some credit. No, you can't buy any credits until you have land use approval. So it is once you have that, and once you have to get a stormwater permit, because now the county planning commission says you have preliminary approval, go get all your permits. That's when this kicks in.
So in Hans, really, isn't the biggest benefit of this is this is going to be a Sundance County holistic approach to looking at stormwater versus now we do each individual. We might do it 50 times a year for different developments. We're looking at a bigger picture.
100%.
Trying to make that work together to do a better job of dealing with stormwater.
That's
Not a fair.
100%, Mr. President.
Okay.
Couldn't have said it better.
Okay.
Does this process require a public hearing? Or?
No. In the ordinance.
Before we
yes.
adopt it?
Sure.
The ordinance would, yeah.
Yeah.
We'll have input from the
It'll
public.
be introduced and everybody can comment. Sure. Yeah. Yep. Sure.
It does not change the timeline, and that's always important. Remember, because you still have to get a stormwater permit.
Right.
It's just a matter of how do you design your compliance components.
Very interesting.
Ready
Well,
to?
you're doing good. Yeah. Keep on.
Okay, these are the projects we have on the books which are approved, which are in design, etc. So, if you look at the Business Park Phase 1 and Phase 2. These are our prime projects. As a matter of fact, on the many thanks to Ms. Thompson, she's the whiz behind the slide and the real designs. These two, especially Business Park 1, we modified a couple of times in order to get every credit we have out of it. It's completed, accepted, it has credit, we have used the credit, and we added what watershed it's in, what HUCs it in, and what different HUCs are in. So this is just for you to show, this is the type of ledger we have to use for the state, and there will be more columns about credits used and credits sold, credits remaining. But that gives you sort of a feel for the tracking we have to do for these projects. The afforestation projects on Angola and on Burbage Road are completed. And we also created, the Burbage Road project created some wetlands. So these wetland credits we cannot use, we can only use the water quality component of that wetland. Important distinction. The Lighthouse Road remediation was just done. Just recently you approved that project, so that's completed. The Cannon Road project is being advertised tomorrow. We do have the permits for that. It's moving forward. That is the project we had to do anyway for the inland bays. So we're combining a very great benefit to us. Currently today, the Inland Bays Road, the Cannon Road, the Mount Joy Road intersection, all this impervious, the Friendship Road piece intersection, all that impervious today is not managed. There's no quality component for that whatsoever. So what we're building helps us in the site drainage and in the road water quality management aspect. This project has support from South District. My dear friend and colleague, Mr. Probart, is fully in support of it. Delta actually provided the survey for the project. Delta actually provided the assistance in the traffic management and in the permitting for the entrance work for this project. So this is a very unique project where we have a common let's say, interest. Ms. Thompson will guarantee Ms. Probart there will be no more flooding on Cannon Road.
You personally guarantee that? It's all right.
Wow.
We feel very confident. I think we will have that licked. You've seen us downstairs a couple of times. You authorized the purchase, which we have acquired, which was a key aspect for this project, the extra land from the church and from the tower.
Yeah.
Without that, and the initial purchase of Guinea Creek, the additional purchases in Guinea Creek, we could not do this project.
That's good, because that a couple of years ago, that was really bad down there. It really was. So that's good. That's my district now, so.
That's why it's even better, he said.
Even better.
Councilman, 2 years ago, you and I could have not, no, your truck would have gotten through Canada. My car would have not
If you had
made
a
it.
jet ski, I could have been right there with you on it.
If I could clarify the record just briefly, you indicated that you discussed those items downstairs, but they were voted on in open session up here.
Thank you, Councilor. There was no collusion, yes.
Mr. Riley.
One quick question on this banking concept. Once you create this wetland, you get these credits, and then you sell them. So the expectation is that that project's going to remain there in perpetuity, but if something unanticipated arose and you needed to redeem that property out of the program, is that a possibility to reverse, get those credits back or replace it with other credits so that you could redeem that piece of property out of the wetlands program?
Councilman, it is your ordinance, but I would strongly recommend against that.
I mean, I would think it would be an extraordinary circumstance, but it's something unanticipated. I mean, is it reversible?
It's not reversible. It's not anticipated to be reversed under state law, and we did not think it would be reversed under county code. But I can, let's say if Angola needs another fire station or an ambulance station, and you'd have to cut the forest down, recreate it, and get credits for and sold. I hope you could find another piece of land, but
Right. Well, I would think the public probably would want it to be irreversible and remain in perpetuity.
we envision that the legislation we want to present to you is irreversible. Yes.
It would be an extraordinary circumstance, but you never know.
Any questions on the project?
Nope, you're good.
So who can use it? We have used it. We will use it. The project we have on the books, not yet fully started design, the Eli Walls project, we will use exclusively for all of our airport projects moving forward. So we have used it. The Business Park Phase 1 we've used several times. Here's a sore spot here. We proposed to use it for the Park Avenue project, and unfortunately, Mr. Lawson and I were not successful. And let's move on from that. So they can use it, but there's limited interest, especially on Delta side. They have their own MRA. They like to do their own things. So. Then, Rick, we have talked with the Division of Parks and Rec, and it's pretty interesting that the public comment spoke to that. The Department of Parks and Rec has expressed interest. The Department of Agriculture has expressed interest. So there are state agencies which would be interested in using the credit program, but they do not have to because they don't apply to our laws in our county code. Municipalities within Sussex County, we have talked quite a bit with the town council because the Eli Walls project will be able to be used by the town of Georgetown for the quadrant that is the southeast quadrant which drains in there, which would be able to use that project. So municipalities can and have expressed interest and will use it, I'm sure. Especially, and as Thompson said, especially beach communities like Dewey Beach, Fenwick, and or Bethany are struggling to find projects to meet that requirement, especially when the MS4 becomes the municipal stormwater regulations move forward. So in the future, I see them using our program in the banking world. Now, this is the key one. As I said, commercial and residential projects will use it, but they will use it based on the criteria you say. For example, if you said, we have all the customers in the world, we don't need any more, we need to catch up on the projects, you would set the percentage required to 0. You can do that. Any council can do that. That would mean they don't have to meet any. If you feel you'd like to, the program is wildly successful, you like to do more, you can set it at 100%.
That's on every year, once a year.
Once a year. Every year, that's the law for once a year. And I believe, and I think Mr. Lawson will back me up on this 100%, that does not tie any future council's hands. So you have a tool in your toolbox you do not have today, which will improve water quality one way or another.
Very interesting.
When you say it's the law, is that a legislative action, or is that when you're talking, is that the code, the county code?
Once you create the county code,
okay, that's the law.
That's the county law,
okay,
which gives future county councils
the ability to amend it.
the ability to set the numbers.
Could a council in 20 years amend that?
And they can amend the county code any day.
Okay.
Yes. Let me go to the history, which is really the interesting part. No, I have the milestones in there, so yeah. So we will have to update Chapter 90. That's our law today. And Mr. Moore and I date ourselves, unfortunately, right? So I've been around in Sussex County long enough to remember when the Sussex County had delegated authority over stormwater. In the early days of stormwater regulations, in the late 80s, the county had jurisdiction. And so I submitted a number of projects because I was on the other side of this world. It's a project as old as the Glade, stormwater designed by Hans, county engineer now, with review by County Sussex, with a permit from Sussex. That's how it was built. And that was the law, Chapter 90, which governed what we did then. It was adopted in 1990, and I think we gave up authority in 91 or 92. So it was a very short-lived window where we actually had stormwater authority under the state law. So that chapter, however, was never amended except under two circumstances where we sort of inserted stuff. And the most recent one, when the district created permitting for individual projects and lots, we had to amend that code. But we only amended a very tiny piece of it to allow the district to do that. So when you read that code today, it makes little to no sense. Because we don't have authority, but you read it as if we did have authority. So we really have to update it overall, and Councilor's still here. You have my other. So Mr. Robertson and I discussed what would have to be done with that, and he will be obviously instrumental in putting it in the right words. So we have to take these updates and tailor it to the stormwater regulations as they exist today under state law, and we have to introduce the banking program terms into that ordinance. So on the side with the memorandum, so we have to do a couple of things to allow that to move forward with the state of Delaware. But we have guidance. We have already agreements in place with Delaware, which we want to model it after, and we will have to have the proper language with the NRC. So again, working with our council, once we have the ordinance, we would then go immediately to work to finalize our version of the agreement and submit it to the state.
How does all this interface with the Conservation District?
Only in one small aspect. When they get it, let's say a year from now we have it in place, you've set the ordinance, the budget ordinance, the numbers are in place, the first project comes in and they have to purchase X percent from the county. Now,
Conservation District does?
No, the Conservation District now gets a submittal.
Okay.
And the resource protection volume is literally a volume measured in cubic feet. Let's say the project has a required volume of 100,000 cubic feet. They're buying X percent from the county. So when they submit and review the plans, that number is reduced, and the practices proposed and designed will reflect it. That's the only interaction.
Okay.
It does not change the timelines or the processes.
Good. Okay.
So as I said, we have to get the final language agreed, and they indicated to us they will do sort of fast-track legal approach. So I see the memorandum before you. At the same time, you probably see the draft budget. As I already talked about the history of the ordinance, we synchronize it with the two state laws. The one is the stormwater regulation, the other one is the one authorizing the stormwater utilities for the counties. And we take out all the sediment references that we discussed yesterday. In the future, today the county code appears as if we had sediment jurisdiction. We don't. So we have to remove all. The district asked us to remove all of these references, which we will. As a matter of fact, all these pictures we have in there are all examples of our projects.
Right.
So you saw that. We gave you the summary of the various paragraph or sections we're touching, and then of course we add the new section about the banking. So, and let's go back to these here again. We have the percentage for participation, Councilman Riley. We have it listed here. So if anybody asks you, that's in the percentage calculations participation levels. So here is what what we will show you in hopefully 3 or 4 weeks. Now, but the, go ahead.
$64,000 question. How much money do you think this will yield to the council to use towards purchase of open space?
How much do you
How
want it
many
to be?
dollars? I mean, is it going to be a substantial amount of money, or?
Depends on what we set it at.
Thank you,
Well, I
Mr.
mean, we're going to set it at,
something.
a reasonable rate. We probably have some idea where it's going to fall. There's a floor, obviously, and we're probably not going to go, it's so high, so
It is, may I say,
mean,
it's a substantial amount of money.
substantial. I mean, millions, hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands.
What percentage did you have in mind?
We need to,
When we come to you during the budget process, we will get the you see, we could easily do this. We could get the approved projects for 1 year from the Conservation District, total up all the volumes. So here's the total volume which was permitted that year, and then give you ranges. Hey, if you pick 25%, it would be X. If you pick 50, it's Y.
and it'd be a substantial, I mean, because to me, in my mind, there's two benefits. Number one, we're setting aside, areas in conservation, and then secondly, we're generating revenue to put more areas in conservation.
And more projects, right.
Right, so it's,
Now you will hear one thing, and there's no doubt you will hear one argument against this. Because today, in a non-holistic approach world, we do not drive the decision of what practice you use.
conservation district.
No, they don't, neither one of us, neither the county nor the district.
That's right.
Anybody who designs these can pick whatever practice they like to use.
Okay.
The go-to practice is the functional equivalent, because it has two benefits for the developing entity. One, it provides functional equivalency, which checks the box for quality. Checks the box. I'm not saying it does quality, it checks the box for quality. But also it says it creates these giant ponds which are perceived as amenities.
True.
Perceived.
Well, I mean, people like to look at the ponds, especially if they have a fountain.
But these are the same people who call the engineering department complaining about the water quality.
True.
The exact same people.
So what's the
These are the
summation of
same
the
people
argument
who
against
have.
it?
So I happened to be at a unnamed subdivision this morning at 6:30. For some reasons, the county engineer had to be present. And it is November 15th. And when I left, there was a solid frost on my lawn. And when I got there were probably 20%, 25% of all lawns in that subdivision did not have frost. It's very interesting. Frost one lawn, next frost, no.
Fertilizer,
No.
irrigation.
November 15th. So we were inspecting a number of low areas of poor drainage, right?
Right.
And we all know the telltale signs of over-fertilization.
Yeah.
I had it in my hand this morning.
It's nice and green though.
It is very nice and green. So,
And there is such a thing as over-irrigating also, right?
Oh my goodness, yes.
so we did some backwards calculations of some of the times we observed. Would you think that 9 inches a week is a little high?
In Delaware, maybe in the Amazon it might be all right.
Anyway, so, if I may use the President's words, we're trying to give council a holistic tool to enhance water quality.
It's a great thing.
It took us I apologize, it took forever to get here, but we have arrived here. So a timeline, we do have a timeline, so we certainly given a lot of thought. We do have some need for speed because it needs to move into the budget process. So we'd like to present you a draft in December, which gives us 4 weeks to work on it. It's not going to be a long ordinance. It's not like Chapter 99, no, and it's not going to be like 110. It's going to be very targeted, very short. Nothing like the buffer ordinance, no, Mr. It's going to be three pages. It's going to be a very short ordinance and a very short agreement. So we will have that, so which would allow you to set a hearing date if you see fit, or you could tell us, no, we don't like your short 3 pages, Mr. Robinson, Mr. Medlarz, please reappear first week in January. But sort of want to get the ball at least rolling, and then see where it goes from there. But always keep it in mind with the adoption, as you can see that the adoption looking close to the introduction of the budget, because we have to be careful about that these two timelines don't overlap in a way that we can't get it in the budget anymore.
Okay.
Very interesting.
So we don't have a motion. I'll just ask you to.
Right.
Are we on the right? Are we on the right track?
Yep. Comments from council?
I think it's a good track.
I think it's a good thing.
I wish we had been here 2 years ago, but
Oh, I do too. Excellent. I do too, but. And thank you for your presentation, but thank you for all your hard work.
yes, Ms. Thompson is an instrumental partner here in this process. You know, she worked for the district for many years, so it's very interesting that we have the double perspective. And she worked for private development, so she's designed it, reviewed it, and now she's in the legislative process. So definitely,
Wow, full circle.
yes, full circle.
Okay. Are you ready to move on now?
Yes, thank you, Mr. President, for